I always believed I knew the workings of the human mind. As a psychologist, reading subtle cues and unspoken truths had become second nature to me. Yet nothing could prepare me for the storm of doubt that began brewing in my own home. It started with the little things, the almost imperceptible shifts in my wife's behavior that only someone with my training and my love for her would catch. At first, I dismissed the late-night text message chimes as nothing more than work emails or chats with her friends. We were both professionals with busy lives in the city, often bringing work home. But when Hannah, my wife of 7 years, angled her body away from me on the couch, hiding her phone screen as I passed by, I felt an uneasy twinge in my gut. She flashed a quick, nervous smile. "Just a silly meme from Nicole," she explained casually, naming her best friend. Her tone was light, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. That fleeting moment of guardedness set off a faint alarm in the back of my mind. Over the following weeks, the alarms grew louder. Hannah had become unexpectedly protective of her phone and laptop. Previously, she'd leave her devices lying around, occasionally asking me to plug in her charger or respond to a text while she cooked. Now, her phone was glued to her hand. She took it with her everywhere, even into the bathroom for a quick shower. Her devices had new passwords I hadn't been told about. One evening, as she washed dishes, I playfully picked up her phone, which was buzzing on the counter. Instantly, she rushed in from the next room, suds still on her hands, and snatched it. "I'll handle it," she snapped, then softened her voice. "Sorry, it's just work stuff. Confidential." I nodded slowly, but a cold weight settled in my stomach. My wife had never been so territorial about her privacy before. I began noticing other changes too. Her appearance, for one. It was subtle, but I saw it. She started putting more effort into her looks each morning. There were new clothes in her wardrobe, stylish and a bit more daring than her usual office attire. A couple of times I caught a whiff of a new perfume on her, something musky and evocative, when she headed out to run errands or grab coffee with a friend. When I commented on it, she blushed and mumbled something about a free sample from a boutique. It wasn't just the physical changes. Emotionally, she was drifting away from me. Our evening conversations, once filled with laughter or comfortable silence, turned thin and perfunctory. She often seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give clipped answers or none at all, retreating into her phone or saying she was tired. Intimacy between us dwindled. On the rare occasions we made love, her mind seemed miles away. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling that I was losing her piece by piece. A knot of anxiety tightened in my chest as these signs piled up. I found myself lying awake at night, replaying each odd moment in my head. The guarded texts, the new lingerie I found stuffed in a shopping bag in her closet, the nights she claimed to be working late at the office more frequently than ever before. My training told me these could be signs of something amiss, possibly infidelity. But my heart desperately wanted to deny it. I reminded myself that correlation isn't proof. Hannah could be going through personal stress or trying to reclaim some youthfulness. Perhaps she had a friend confiding a secret that she felt compelled to protect. My rational mind ran through benign explanations, but my instincts whispered that something was very wrong. One Friday evening, the situation escalated. Hannah was supposedly out with Nicole, a girls' night at a trendy new wine bar. She had kissed me on the cheek before leaving, wearing that alluring new perfume and a dress I'd never seen before, a burgundy wrap that hugged her figure in a way that made my heart ache with appreciation and suspicion all at once. She'd laughed off my raised eyebrow. "Nicole insisted I dress up. You know how she is," she said with a wink. I managed a smile as I watched her walk out the door, feeling a chill despite the warm summer night. As the hours ticked by, I sat alone in our living room with a book I wasn't reading. The wine in my glass went untouched. My gaze kept drifting to the silent phone on the coffee table, willing it to light up with a message from her, an update, a selfie of her and Nicole having fun, anything to reassure me. Instead, there was nothing. I texted her a simple, "Everything okay?" at 10 p.m. It showed as delivered, but no reply came for nearly an hour. When it did, the text read, "All good, heading home soon." The response was oddly formal for Hannah. No emoji, none of her usual warmth. Something about it made me grit my teeth. She got home just after midnight. I heard the jingle of her keys and then the door creak open. I hurried to put away the pretense of my book. When I greeted her in the hallway, I noticed immediately that her hair was slightly disheveled and her cheeks were flushed. The scent of perfume and was that cologne? Hung about her like an accusing cloud. My heart sank. There was a distinctly masculine fragrance clinging to her clothes, something woodsy and foreign. "How was the night out?" I asked gently, keeping my voice as even as possible while my pulse thudded in my ears. "It was fun," she replied, avoiding my eyes as she slipped off her heels. "Nicole and I had a lot of catching up to do. The bar was great." She moved past me quickly, as if eager to escape further questions, and headed toward the bathroom. "I'm exhausted. I'll wash up and head to bed." Exhausted. And she certainly looked it. Or was that guilt weighing on her? I stood in the hallway for a long moment after the bathroom door closed behind her. The sound of the shower started, and through the rush of water, I thought I heard something like a sob, quickly stifled. I clenched my fists by my sides, conflicting emotions warring within me. If my suspicions were true, if she had been with someone else tonight, at least she had the decency to cry about it. A bitter voice inside me remarked. Another part of me felt a surge of guilt for even thinking that. This was the woman I loved, the woman I had planned a future with. I needed clarity. The not knowing was a torture of its own, an endless loop of doubt and hope clashing in my mind. As a therapist, I had always preached the importance of communication, of confronting issues head-on. Perhaps I should just talk to her. Lay my concerns on the table calmly and honestly. If anyone should be able to navigate a difficult conversation, it was me. Yet, each time I rehearsed that approach, I imagined her reaction. Would she deny everything? Get angry that I didn't trust her? Perhaps she would turn it around, accuse me of being paranoid or controlling. I'd seen it happen with my clients. I'd heard story after story of gaslighting and deflection from unfaithful spouses when challenged. And what if I was wrong? Bringing it up without proof could irreparably damage our relationship if, by some slim chance, my fears were unfounded. No, I needed evidence. Concrete, undeniable proof of what my intuition was screaming. If Hannah truly was being unfaithful, I couldn't continue living in uncertainty. I had to know for sure. Late that night, after she had fallen asleep, I made my first serious breach of trust. I carefully slid out of bed and tiptoed to where her handbag lay by the bedroom armchair. My hands trembled as I unlatched it and peered inside. I felt like a thief rifling through her personal things, my stomach churning at the invasion of privacy, an irony not lost on me given the circumstances. Inside, I found the usual contents: wallet, keys, some makeup, a packet of gum. But then I noticed something new: a folded slip of paper tucked into the inner zip pocket. With a quick glance to ensure she was still sleeping soundly, I pulled it out. It was a receipt from a high-end downtown hotel, dated 2 weeks ago. My blood ran cold as I scanned it. Champagne and dessert for two, charged to a room number. The receipt was in her name. My vision tunneled. 2 weeks ago, she had told me she was having a late meeting followed by a dinner with a female client. I remembered that night vividly because I'd offered to pick her up, and she insisted I didn't need to, saying it might run late and she'd grab a rideshare home. The memory of her coming home past midnight, cheeks flushed, and that same faint cologne scent on her blouse crashed over me like a wave. And here was likely proof: a hotel room, champagne for two, a romantic rendezvous, by all indications, not a work meeting. I quietly returned the receipt and slunk out of the bedroom, heart pounding so fiercely I was sure it would wake her. In the living room, I sank onto the sofa, head in my hands. The evidence was there, but it felt surreal. I wanted to scream or cry or hit something, perhaps all three at once, but I found myself in a state of eerie calm. A part of my mind, the clinical part that had been trained to observe and analyze, noted my dissociation with detached interest. Shock. I was in shock. Staring into the darkness of our quiet apartment, I knew I had crossed a threshold. There was no going back to blissful ignorance. But I also knew that a single receipt wasn't the kind of undeniable proof I needed if I were to confront her, especially if I wanted to expose this affair definitively. Hannah could concoct an explanation for a receipt, a celebration for a coworker, a gift from a client. Liars in desperate corners can be frighteningly creative. No, if I was to truly corner her with the truth, I would need more. I would need to catch her in the act or have evidence so concrete that no mental gymnastics could explain it away. I realized with a grim resolve that I was willing to go further into morally gray territory to obtain it. If she was betraying me after all, What moral high ground did I truly owe her? As I sat in the dark, a chilling clarity emerged. I would not confront Hannah now. Instead, I would play the long game. I would gather evidence like a detective, patiently, methodically, and intelligently. And when I was ready, I would lay it all out. Not just to her, but to everyone who mattered. The thought of it sent a tremor through me, part agony, part vindictive thrill. I loathed that it had come to this, but her betrayal, if confirmed, deserved consequences. I took a deep, steadying breath and locked away my tumult of emotions behind a professional demeanor. If my wife was going to treat our marriage like one of her little games, then I would quietly and cleverly become the most dangerous player. Part 2. The Trap. That weekend came and went under a tense quiet. I maintained my facade of normalcy, treating Hannah with gentle affection and not a hint of the turmoil inside me. If she sensed something off, she didn't show it. In fact, she seemed relieved that I wasn't pressing her about the Friday outing. Perhaps she thought I'd accepted her stories without question. In reality, my mind was racing with plans. In my line of work, when faced with a problem, I methodically devise a strategy to address it. The same analytical skills I used to help patients were now turned toward my own life. I needed irrefutable evidence and an opportunity to catch Hannah in the act. The hotel receipt had been a wake-up call. It proved she was very likely cheating, but it wasn't enough for the confrontation I envisioned. I wanted to unveil her betrayal in a way that left no room for manipulation or doubt. On Monday, during my lunch hour at the clinic, I discreetly made some purchases. First, a GPS tracking device. A small, state-of-the-art gadget no larger than a matchbox. It was advertised as a tool for keeping tabs on teenage drivers, but its real-time location tracking would suit my purposes perfectly. I paid in cash at an electronics hobbyist shop across town, wrapping the device in its plain bag and tucking it into my briefcase with a mix of excitement and dread. Next, I visited an antique store not far from our apartment. After browsing a while, I found it. A beautiful little decorative wooden box, the kind meant for jewelry or keepsakes. It was finely carved with a floral motif and looked just extravagant enough to pass as a thoughtful gift. I imagined it containing a piece of jewelry or a memento, something a lover might give in a romantic flourish. Finally, the piece de resistance. I arranged for concert tickets to one of Hannah's favorite bands. By sheer luck, I recalled that the Lumineers, an indie folk band she adored, were playing a special outdoor show in a neighboring state the coming Saturday night. Months ago, she had wistfully mentioned wanting to go, but we hadn't bought tickets, citing our busy schedules. It was exactly the sort of event she would jump at, especially if presented as a surprise. I managed to secure 2 seats via an online resale marketplace, paying a steep premium for last-minute delivery. It stung to spend money on what felt like funding her dalliance, but I reminded myself it was an investment in the truth. That evening, under the guise of catching up on patient notes, I secluded myself in our home office. With the door locked, I carefully prepared the trap. I hid the GPS device in the decorative box's velvet lining, nestled in such a way that it wouldn't be immediately visible. The tracker was silent and motion-activated. As long as the box, or whatever bag it was in, was moving, it would ping its location to an app on my phone. I tested it by walking around the apartment. A small, blinking dot traced my movements on the screen map. Perfect. Next, I printed a pair of elegant-looking concert ticket vouchers for the show. They looked official, complete with seat numbers and a QR code. The real tickets would be held at the venue's will call under a pseudonym I provided, but Hannah wouldn't know that distinction. The printouts would do. Finally, I composed a handwritten note to include with the gift. A short message designed to melt her heart and dissolve her caution. I took a moment, pen hovering above paper, to channel the tone of a passionate lover. It was surprisingly easy to imagine, given the text messages and hints I'd observed. In neat cursive, disguised slightly from my own handwriting style, I wrote, "My dearest H, I know how much you've wanted to see them live. Surprise! 2 tickets for you and me this Saturday. After the show, let's escape to our little haven. I've arranged a special night for us at a cabin by the lake. Pack an overnight bag. I'll take care of everything else. All my love, yours." I chose not to sign a name. The intimate tone and the use of just an initial H for her name would strongly imply it was from her paramour. In our years together, I had never written her such a note. It wasn't my style, but presumably it was his. I imagined her reading it, heart pounding with excitement and guilt. Would she think it strange or too forward? Possibly, but affairs thrive on grandiosity and stolen pleasures. She would likely be thrilled that her lover was planning something so extravagant and romantic. I read over the note twice, ensuring it struck the right balance of affectionate and conspiratorial. Satisfied, I folded the paper and placed it inside the wooden box atop the tickets, then closed the lid. From the outside, it looked like a beautiful surprise from a smitten admirer. The hardest part was arranging its delivery without implicating myself. I decided on a courier service rather than standard mail, aiming for it to arrive when I was away from home. On Wednesday, I left work mid-afternoon and drove across town to a private courier company. I filled out the forms with deliberate misinformation. The delivery address was our apartment, attention to Hannah, of course. But for the sender's name and address, I put a generic private gift services with a non-existent P.O. box. I requested same-day rush delivery. With a bit of extra cash slipped to the dispatcher, I ensured the package would arrive at our door within the next 2 hours. Everything was set. My heart thudded in anticipation and anxiety as I returned to my office. I could barely concentrate on my remaining afternoon appointments, checking my phone repeatedly for the tracker's first signal, but of course the device would remain dormant until it moved from our apartment. At 5:15 p.m., I wrapped up my last session and hurriedly left the clinic. In the car, I finally allowed myself to check the app. A small red pin marked home, indicating the box was indeed at our address. It had arrived. The question now was how Hannah reacted to receiving this mysterious present. I imagined the courier handing her the box, her perplexed expression turning to intrigue once she saw the note inside. Did her hands shake as she read the lover's words? Did she blush, smile secretly? Or was she alarmed that it was delivered to the apartment? I doubted she'd suspect me. After all, I was alibied at work and had shown no sign of awareness. More likely, she would think her lover managed to surprise her. If I knew my wife at all, she was probably giddy and nervous at whatever illicit plans were implied. When I walked through our door that evening, I found her in the kitchen stirring a pot of pasta, every bit the picture of a normal wife making dinner. She greeted me with a soft smile and a kiss on the cheek that, for once, seemed genuinely enthusiastic. "How was your day?" she asked, almost too casually. "Busy," I replied, hanging up my coat. My eyes subtly scanned the living area. Nothing seemed out of place, no obvious gift box lying around. If anything had arrived, she had hidden it away before I got home. I expected as much. Over dinner, Hannah was notably chatty, in better spirits than I'd seen her in weeks. She talked about a new project at work, her words tumbling out faster than usual. I listened and nodded in the right places, but my mind was elsewhere. I was studying her, the slight flush in her cheeks, the brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there for a long time. She looked like someone with a thrilling secret. At one point, she mentioned, almost offhandedly, "By the way, Nicole texted me today. She got tickets to that Lumineers concert I was telling you about. This Saturday. She invited me to come along last minute since she had an extra ticket." Hannah kept her tone light, but she watched my reaction carefully over her fork. My pulse quickened, though outwardly I forced a neutral smile. Here it was, her cover story, in the making. So she was going to accept the invitation from her friend to attend the concert. It aligned perfectly with the trap I'd set, which meant she had taken the bait. "Oh, that's great," I said, keeping my voice supportive. "I know you were disappointed we couldn't go. It's nice of Nicole to think of you." Hannah's relief was palpable. Her shoulders unknotted slightly. "Yeah," she murmured, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "I thought it'd be fun. Kind of short notice, but it's a cool opportunity." "Absolutely. You should go and enjoy yourself," I encouraged. My stomach churned at the duplicity in our exchange, both of us pretending. I wondered if she had any idea that my support was as false as her story. Under the table, I pressed my nails into my palm to channel the surge of bitterness into something physical and hidden. That night, I could hardly sleep. My mind kept running through contingencies. Would everything go according to plan on Saturday? I had to be ready for anything. The tracker gave me some peace of mind. No matter what lies she told, it would lead me to the truth. I had also prepared a small digital camera with a powerful zoom lens, which I had borrowed from a colleague under the pretext of birdwatching. It sat in my car trunk along with a pair of compact binoculars and even a voice recorder, should I find the opportunity to capture audio evidence. I was leaving nothing to chance. In the early hours of Saturday morning, long before dawn, I quietly slipped out of bed. In the soft glow of my phone's screen, I checked the tracker app. The red dot glowed steady at home. The box, and presumably the hidden tracker within it, hadn't moved. Good. That meant she hadn't tried to stash it somewhere else or discard it. Possibly, she had already transferred the contents, the tickets and note, to her purse or a safe spot, but I suspected she'd keep the box itself hidden until after the deed, not wanting me to find a romantic gift from another man. I took a moment to gaze at Hannah's sleeping form under the blankets. She looked peaceful, innocent even, and a pang of sorrow lanced through me. How did we get here? I wondered bitterly. Less than a year ago, we were talking about starting a family, making plans for the future. Now, I was plotting her downfall, like she was a hostile witness in a trial. My jaw tightened, and I reminded myself of the hotel receipt, of the lies and late nights. Whatever happened to our marriage, she had dealt the first cruel blow. I was merely responding in kind. I spent the day restless but focused. I feigned a mild cold to avoid any social outings or chores, telling Hannah I planned to just rest at home. She, in turn, pretended to commiserate and then carefully laid the groundwork for her own departure. In the afternoon, she packed an overnight bag, trying to be subtle, but I saw her slip it into the trunk of her car. Just in case I get back super late and crash at Nicole's place, she said casually when I happened to catch her in the garage. She was offering the explanation unasked, a nervous habit of over-justifying that I knew well. I simply nodded, playing the trustful, oblivious husband one last time. By early evening, she was ready to leave for the concert. She dressed in fitted jeans, boots, and a black blouse that edged into the territory of sexy. Not too flashy, but I noticed the extra touches. The lace of a black bra peeking subtly at the neckline, a spritz of that musky perfume on her neck and wrists. She put on just a bit more makeup than usual, the way she did for special occasions. Standing there at the door, she looked heartbreakingly beautiful and utterly unknowable to me. "Well, wish me fun," Hannah said with a forced little laugh, avoiding my eyes as she slung her purse over her shoulder. My eyes flicked to the purse. I wondered if the tickets and note were inside or if she had already memorized the details. "Have a great time," I replied, summoning a sincere smile. "Text me if you need anything, okay? And say hi to Nicole for me." The irony was bitter. I doubted Nicole would even be there, poor woman, unaware her name was being used as a cover. "I will," she said softly. She hesitated then, and for a moment I thought I saw conflict in her expression. Guilt, perhaps, or the urge to come clean. If so, it passed quickly. She gave me one last peck on the cheek. I felt her hand tremble against my arm as she did. Then she turned and walked out to the car. I watched from the window as she drove off into the dusk. The moment her car rounded the corner, I dashed to my own vehicle parked down the street. My heart was racing, but my mind was clear. I opened the tracking app on my phone. A blinking dot marked her progress, heading out of the city. "Showtime," I whispered to myself, starting the engine. It was time to follow my wife into the shadows of her deceit, and to catch her, at last, in the act. Part 3. The cabin twilight had settled by the time I tailed Hannah out of the city. I kept a safe distance, relying on the GPS ping to keep me informed of her route. The traffic thinned as we left the bright urban streets behind. My headlights stayed far enough back to be just another anonymous car on the highway. Every so often, another vehicle would come between us, and I felt a spike of anxiety until I checked the app and found her signal steady up ahead. She drove west, towards the state line. The concert venue was in that direction, about a 2-hour drive. As miles rolled by, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges before darkness took over. The rhythm of the road did nothing to calm me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were bloodless. I rehearsed what might come next, what I might see, bracing myself for impact. Around 8 p.m., my tracker indicated she was nearing the town where the concert was being held. But to my surprise, she didn't stop in the small city center where the venue was. Instead, her car icon bypassed the exit that would lead to the amphitheater and continued along a rural highway. I frowned at the glowing map on my phone mount. Perhaps they planned to meet at a cabin before or after the show, as the note suggested. Or maybe, more likely, attending the concert was never her real plan at all. The tickets were just a convenient pretext for her to get away with him overnight. It seemed the two lovers had decided that their privacy was more important than seeing the band. A dark part of me was glad. It meant more time for them to incriminate themselves and less chance of them hiding in a crowd where I couldn't follow. I drove on, tailing the red dot. The roads turned from multi-lane highways to winding two-lane blacktop, flanked by dense pines and the occasional sleepy farmhouse. The only illumination was my headlights and the intermittent blink of cell tower lights in the distance. My heart pounded harder with each mile deeper into the middle of nowhere. Finally, the tracker pinged an address off a remote county road near Lake Haven, a popular nature retreat area with cabins and vacation rentals. I killed my headlights and slowed as I approached the turnoff. Up ahead through the trees, I saw the faint glow of taillights as Hannah's car made the same turn. I waited, counting off seconds, then followed. The side road was gravel, full of ruts and dips. I hung back far enough to avoid my engine noise carrying in the still night air. Through the canopy of trees, I caught glimpses of her brake lights until eventually they disappeared. I consulted the map. The dot was still, indicating she'd reached her destination. I eased my car off the road onto a patch of dirt behind some thick shrubbery. The cabin likely wasn't far, perhaps around the next bend. I didn't want to risk the crunch of gravel under my tires giving me away. From here on, I'd proceed on foot. My mouth was dry as I retrieved the camera from the trunk and slung it around my neck. The night air was warm and alive with the chorus of crickets and distant frogs by the lake. I moved slowly, deliberately, down the road, keeping to the soft shoulder where fallen pine needles muffled my footsteps. Rounding a gentle curve, I saw it. A quaint log cabin set about 30 yards off the road, nestled amid tall pines. Warm yellow light glowed from the windows, cutting through the gloom. Hannah's car was parked in front, and next to it, another vehicle, a dark-colored SUV. That must belong to him. Even from a distance, seeing the two cars side by side made my stomach clench. It was as concrete a sign as any that she was here with someone else. As I crept closer, using the trees as cover, the front door of the cabin swung open. My pulse jumped into my throat. Hannah stepped out onto the porch, illuminated by the cabin's exterior lantern. She was smiling, that wide, youthful grin that had once been reserved for me, and she nervously tucked her hair behind her ear. A figure emerged behind her. A tall man with broad shoulders and a confident gait. He placed a hand on the small of her back as he came into view. Even in the low light, I recognized him. It was Mark, one of her colleagues from work. I had met him briefly at a company holiday mixer the year before. We'd chatted over drinks. He was a project manager or team lead in her department, if memory served. At the time, I thought nothing of his friendly demeanor or easy charm. Now it took on a sickening new context. So it's you, I thought, anger surging hot in my veins. My teeth clenched so hard I thought they might crack. Mark pulled Hannah into an embrace on the porch. I heard a murmur of voices, their exact words lost to the night. Her laughter rang out, high and clear, a sound that once brought me joy, now twisting the knife in my heart. He said something quietly, and she playfully swatted his arm, pretending to protest. They were so at ease, so intimate. There, under the porch light, he leaned down and kissed her. I raised the camera, my hands trembling, and snapped a photo. The lens captured them in that betraying kiss. Her arms looping around his neck, his fingers tangled in her hair. Through the viewfinder, I could see Hannah's face, eyes closed, lips parted with the kind of tenderness and passion I hadn't seen from her in a long time. I wanted to scream, to burst out of the shadows and rip them apart. My blood thundered in my ears, but I forced myself to stay still. Not yet. I had to be patient a little longer. They broke the kiss, and Mark whispered something as he nuzzled her neck. She nodded and took his hand, leading him back inside the cabin. The door closed, cutting off the golden slice of light and leaving me once again in darkness. I crept closer through the trees, circling around the side of the cabin. From this angle, I could see through a gap in the curtains of a large window. I steadied myself behind the broad trunk of an oak and peered in. Hannah and Mark were in the living area, a cozy space with rustic decor. In the fireplace, embers glowed. They must have lit a fire earlier. On the coffee table sat an open bottle of wine and 2 glasses. My wife was in his arms on the couch, her legs draped over his lap as they talked and laughed softly. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, and she gazed at him with an expression of such affection that it made my chest ache. It was the look she used to give me in our honeymoon phase. Pure, adoring. I lifted the camera again, zooming in through the window. Click! A shot of them, cuddled close, her head resting on his shoulder while his hand caressed her thigh. Click! Another as he tilted her chin up and captured her lips in another kiss. Deeper this time. She arched against him. I saw his hand wander under her blouse and her fingers curl into his shirt. I captured that too, though part of me wanted to hurl the camera aside and look away. My vision blurred with furious tears. I blinked them back aggressively. Focus, I snarled inwardly. You came for evidence. Get it and get out. Through the window, their silhouettes shifted. Mark pulled Hannah to her feet and led her toward the adjacent room, likely the bedroom, as it disappeared out of my view. The implications of what would happen next made me feel physically ill. I had seen enough, more than enough. The proof was indisputable. My wife was having an affair, fully and brazenly. And now I had photographic evidence of her infidelity, images that would burn the truth into the minds of anyone who saw them. I retreated as quietly as I could, stepping back from the window. A floorboard inside creaked, and for one heart-stopping moment I saw Hannah's shape passing by the window again, as if she might peer out. I pressed myself flat against the rough bark of the tree, scarcely daring to breathe. But she wasn't looking for me. She was dimming the lights. A second later, the room went dark, and only faint orange firelight flickered through the cracks in the curtains. In the darkness, I could hear distant, muffled sounds from the cabin. A low moan, a laugh, the unmistakable urgency of lovers who thought they were utterly alone. Each sound stabbed at me. I turned and crept away, retracing my steps into the woods until I reached the road. Once back at my car, safe from their sight and earshot, I finally allowed the storm inside me to break. I slumped into the driver's seat, hands shaking violently on the steering wheel. A ragged sob tore from my throat, primal and painful. I pounded the steering wheel with the heel of my hand, once, twice, needing some outlet for the anguish and rage that threatened to consume me. Alone in the silence of the car, I gasped for air, struggling to regain control. The images of what I'd just witnessed played on an endless loop in my mind. Hannah's blissful face as she kissed Mark, her body pressed against his on that couch. In that moment, something in me hardened into pure resolve. The love I still felt was there, yes, but it was cloaked in something cold and steely. She had no idea what pain her little adventure had caused, but she would. It took several minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. I took that time to carefully remove the memory card from the camera and slip it into my wallet for safekeeping. The evidence was secure. As I started the engine and pulled back onto the gravel road, I cast one last glance toward the cabin, now just a shadowy outline among the trees. A bitter thought crossed my mind. They would spend the night here together in each other's arms while I drove home to an empty bed. But this would be the last night I endured such humiliation. I spoke aloud into the dark car, voice cold and clear. Enjoy it while you can. Your time is up. With that, I drove off into the night, determined to set the final act of my plan into motion. The trap had been sprung, and the prey was fully caught. Now it was time to prepare the grand reveal, the moment when Hannah's two worlds would collide, and her deceit would be laid bare for all to see. Part 4. The Reveal. In the days following my night at the cabin, I moved through life in a state of icy determination. Every time I looked at Hannah, cheerfully chatting about trivial things or humming to herself as she folded laundry, a part of me recoiled. How dare she pretend everything was normal? But I maintained my facade, saving my emotions for what was to come. I spent my evenings quietly preparing for the confrontation. In my home office behind a locked door, I transferred the incriminating photos from the memory card to my computer. The images were as clear as my memory of them. Hannah in another man's arms, her face lit with joy and passion. Viewing them made my hands shake with a fresh wave of anger, but I forced myself to look, to choose the most damning ones. I printed several high-resolution copies on glossy photo paper and tucked them into a manila envelope. I also created a simple slide presentation, a chronological reveal of sorts, on my laptop, just in case I decided a larger display was warranted. This wouldn't be a private confrontation. No, I wanted witnesses, people who mattered to her, to see the truth. The humiliation of exposure would be part of her punishment. With a calm that surprised even me, I reached out to her mother and her two closest friends, Nicole and Grace, and invited them for a special dinner Friday evening. I crafted a cheerful excuse. I have a wonderful surprise planned for Hannah, and I'd love for you to be there to share in a family moment. My voice didn't waver on the calls. If any of them had reservations, they didn't voice them. They were happy to be included in what sounded like a joyous occasion. Hannah noticed I was busy organizing something, but if she suspected anything, she gave no sign. Perhaps she thought I was planning an anniversary treat or a belated birthday celebration for her, as cities, some sort of romantic gesture to make up for my recently distant behavior. I caught her smiling at me curiously a few times that week, as if charmed by my secretive productivity. The irony was almost laughable. Finally, Friday arrived. I left work early to set the stage. At home, I set our dining table with care, laying out Hannah's favorite blue tablecloth and the nice china we rarely used. A bouquet of fresh lilies, her mother's favorite flowers, adorned the center. The apartment filled with the comforting aromas of roasted chicken and herbs. I had ordered catered dishes from a good restaurant and plated them as if I'd cooked all afternoon. The scene looked like the preamble to an intimate family gathering, warm, welcoming, normal. Inside, I felt anything but normal. My heart thudded in my chest as I double-checked the technical setup in the living room. The television was connected via my laptop's HDMI. With one press, I could project my prepared slides onto the 60-inch screen for all to see. I tested it quickly. The first image in the deck was a recent photo of Hannah and me smiling at the beach. An innocuous opening slide. It flickered to life on the TV. Good. Behind that happy image waited the other photos currently hidden from view. I closed the laptop for now, leaving it ready on the side table. At around 6:30 p.m., our guests began to arrive. Hannah's mother, Margaret, was first. A sweet woman in her late 60s, Margaret greeted me with a hug. "This is so lovely, James," she beamed, using my name, clearly delighted at the prospect of a family-oriented surprise. "I was thrilled when you called. You know, Hannah's been sounding so happy this week. I had a feeling something like this was coming." I smiled politely and took her coat, biting back the response I wanted to give. If Margaret only knew why her daughter was so happy lately. Soon after, Nicole and Grace arrived together. Nicole gave me a quick hug and whispered, "I can't wait to see what you've planned. Hannah's going to be so surprised." Grace, a mutual friend of theirs from college, grinned and added, "We almost had to drag the secret out of you on the phone, mister. You've gotten awfully good at keeping secrets." I chuckled at that, a hollow sound in my ears. "It's not easy to slip one past Hannah, but I've managed," I replied. "Can I get you all some wine while we wait for the lady of the hour?" Our guests gathered in the living room, sipping from glasses of Pinot Noir and chatting excitedly. I checked my watch. It was 6:45 and Hannah was due home any minute from her office. Perfect timing. I had told her only that I was making a nice dinner and that we'd have company. I purposefully left the impression it was a casual get-together, nothing more. A few minutes later, we heard the jingle of keys at the door. My pulse quickened. Showtime. Hannah stepped in, looking a bit perplexed to see the small crowd waiting. "Mom? Nicole? Grace?" She blinked in surprise and then looked to me with a half smile. "What's going on?" I stepped forward to greet her with a light kiss on the cheek. "Welcome home," I said warmly. "Surprise! I thought it would be nice to start the weekend with some of your favorite people. A family moment of sorts." "How wonderful," Hannah's mother gushed, moving to hug her. "James said he had a special evening planned. We've all been dying to know what it is." Hannah returned her mother's embrace, but I could see the slight tension in her posture. This was unexpected for her, yet she quickly masked any unease with a gracious smile. I'm pleasantly surprised," she said, chuckling. "It's great to see you all. I didn't realize we were having a party." "Just a little gathering," I said, guiding her gently into the living room where everyone took seats. I remained standing, nerves humming under my skin. I couldn't do this sitting. I needed the commanding position. "Dinner smells amazing," Hannah remarked. She was trying to read my face, I could tell, perhaps wondering what I was up to. "We'll eat soon," I replied. "But first, there's something I'd like to share with all of you." I took a slow breath, my gaze sweeping over our guests. Her friends perched on the sofa, her mother in the armchair, and finally Hannah herself, who had sat on the love seat across from me. She still wore her work clothes, a smart navy skirt and blouse, but I noticed her foot tapping slightly on the rug, an unconscious sign of anxiety that I recognized from years of reading her body language. Oh? Her mother looked curious. Is this the surprise, James? Don't keep us in suspense. I offered Margaret a gentle smile. Yes, this is the surprise. It's something I've been working on for a little while now. My eyes shifted to Hannah. She looked pale under her makeup, her smile frozen uncertainly. Did some primal instinct of hers sense the trap about to spring? I hoped so. I picked up the TV remote and clicked it, awakening the big screen. The happy beach photo of Hannah and me appeared, larger than life, in the living room. In that picture, taken last summer on vacation, we looked like a perfect, loving couple. Do you remember this day, honey? I asked, my voice calm. Hannah nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. Yes, Newport Beach last year. It was such a fun trip. She glanced at our friends and mother, smiling, though her voice had a slight tremor. James, what is this about? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I advanced to the next slide. Another photo of us, this one at a family barbecue with her arm around me. Then another, the two of us laughing at some forgotten joke in the kitchen. A montage of our life together, each image cherry-picked to remind everyone of the bond we shared, the trust and love that had presumably existed. As these images played, I began to speak, narrating with an even tone. I wanted to celebrate my wife tonight, I said, addressing the room but watching Hannah. We've been together for a long time. 7 years of marriage. Hannah's eyes glistened as pictures of our honeymoon appeared. Then the day we bought our house. Perhaps she thought this was an elaborate declaration of love or renewal of vows. Nicole actually gave a little ah sound, clearly moved by the slideshow of happy moments. I continued. Through those years, I thought we shared everything, our dreams, our struggles, our hearts. I allowed a note of melancholy to enter my voice now. The slide had advanced to a blank black frame, intentionally placed. A hush fell in the room. But sometimes, I went on quietly, even the person closest to you can harbor secrets. I heard Hannah suck in a breath. Her mother looked mildly confused at the shift in tone. I set the remote down and picked up a printed sheet of paper I had prepared, a copy of a credit card statement from last month. For instance, I said, feigning a conversational air, I recently discovered a charge at the Lakeside Inn on this statement. I held it up. Funny thing is, I've never been there, and when I asked Hannah about it, she told me it was a spa package she gifted to Nicole. I turned my head to Nicole, raising an eyebrow. Nicole, did you enjoy that spa day at Lakeside Inn? Nicole looked bewildered. What? Hannah, what's he talking about? You never… Hannah stammered, color draining from her face. James, maybe we should discuss this privately, her mother interjected. Hannah, why would you lie about… I didn't let my wife finish her thought. My voice came out sharper now, the mask of calm slipping just a bit. No, I think now is the perfect time to discuss everything. With everyone here. I locked my gaze on Hannah. Unless you'd prefer to explain where you really were that night, dear? Hannah's lips parted, but no words came. Panic flashed in her eyes. She realized something was terribly wrong. James, she said softly, almost pleading, please, don't do this. Do what? I replied, a chill creeping into my tone. Show the truth. Because that's exactly what I intend to do. Grace, eyes wide, leaned forward. What truth? I'm lost here. I gave a short, humorless laugh. Allow me to clarify. I reached for the manila envelope on the side table and drew out a photograph. The one of Hannah and Mark locked in their passionate kiss on the cabin porch, faces clearly visible. Without a word, I held it up for all to see. The reaction was instant and dramatic. Margaret gasped, a hand flying to her mouth as if to hold back a cry. Grace's eyes went huge and she muttered, "Oh my God." Nicole shot to her feet, leaning in to peer at the image to make sure she wasn't seeing things wrong. Hannah herself went ashen. No, where did you… She choked out, rising unsteadily from her seat. I stepped back as she stood, maintaining distance. Where did I get this? I finished for her, voice cutting. From Lake Haven, of course. Recognize it, Hannah? Perhaps this will jog your memory. I clicked the laptop, advancing the slideshow. The TV screen changed from black to the very same photo I was holding, now enlarged, backlit, undeniable. There was Hannah in another man's embrace, in living color before all of us. Hannah let out a strangled noise, half sob, half exclamation, and reached a hand out as if to implore me or to magically erase the image. "Please turn it off," she begged, voice breaking. Tears were already welling in her eyes. "Turn it off?" I echoed bitterly. "Why? Feeling exposed, Hannah? That's an interesting feeling, isn't it?" I advanced to the next slide, another photo, this one of her and Mark inside the cabin by the fire, locked in an intimate kiss on the couch. Hannah's wedding ring was plainly visible on her hand as it rested against his chest. Her mother made a wounded sound, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Hannah, how could you? No, no, no." Hannah was shaking her head frantically. "It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like?" I snapped, my calm facade giving way to righteous fury. "So you're not cheating on me? That's not you in those pictures with another man's tongue down your throat? Enlighten us, please. What exactly are we looking at if not your affair?" Hannah broke into sobs, covering her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry," she wailed. I never meant. It just happened." Nicole put an arm around Margaret, who seemed on the verge of collapse. Grace stared at Hannah in disgust and disbelief. "Hannah, you've been cheating on James?" Grace's voice was laced with shock. "All those times you said you were with me or Nicole, you lied to us too." Nicole's expression hardened as it dawned on her. "That weekend you said you visited your cousin. Was that a lie? And using my name to cover up? How could you drag me into this, Hannah?" "I'm sorry," Hannah cried out, wild-eyed and desperate. "I panicked. I didn't think. I'm so sorry, Nick." I felt a cold smile tug at my lips. The dominoes were falling perfectly. "Your friends and family deserve the truth, Hannah. All of it." My voice was merciless. "Why don't you tell them about your girls' night last weekend? Or should I?" She looked at me, trembling. "Please, James, I'll do anything. Just please stop this." "Stop?" I cut her off sharply. "Was it please stop when you spent the night screwing Mark in that cabin?" I spat the lover's name with venom, and her mother flinched as if slapped. "Was it please stop when you lied to my face over and over? When you came home and kissed me with the same mouth you used to?" I stopped myself, chest heaving. Hannah collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably now. I beg you, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." She crawled a few steps toward me, hands clasped as if in prayer. "Please, James. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Don't do this. Don't hate me." I stared down at her, feeling an unexpected hollowness at the sight. Here was the woman I had loved, reduced to a shattered, pleading mess. Part of me felt a pang of pity, but it was swiftly drowned by indignation. I stepped back out of their reach as she tried to grasp at my pant leg. "Don't touch me," I said coldly. Margaret had buried her face in her hands, weeping quietly. Between her fingers, she whispered, "How could you do this, Hannah? To your husband? To all of us?" Hannah looked to her mother, crawling to her next. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She tried to take her mother's hand, but Margaret pulled away, eyes full of hurt. "This is beyond disappointing," Margaret managed, voice trembling. "James has been nothing but good to you." "My God, Hannah." Grace shook her head in angry disbelief. "I can't believe you lied to us for months. We covered for you when you said you needed space or had work trips. We would have never done that if we knew the truth," Nicole added softly. "I would have told you to your face you were making a terrible mistake, Han. Cheating on James, how could you fool us like that?" The betrayal among her friends was evident. They looked at her not with sympathy, but with a mix of anger and pity. I let the chorus of disappointment and shock hang in the air for a moment. Then I spoke, voice low and steely. "Hannah, listen well, because I want there to be no confusion about what happens now." She lifted her tear-streaked face toward me, eyes swollen and terrified, nodding frantically as if in penance. I drew in a long breath, steadying myself. This was the moment I had fantasized about, and it felt just as powerful as I'd hoped. "Our marriage," I said slowly, clearly, "is over." She let out a keening wail, but I continued unflinching. "I've already contacted a lawyer. Here." I reached behind the side table and produced a folder of documents, the divorce papers I'd had drafted earlier in the week. I tossed them onto the coffee table in front of her. "These are divorce papers. I will be filing on grounds of adultery, and trust me, I have all the evidence needed." My eyes flicked to the photos on the screen. Hannah shook her head, chest heaving. "No, please, James, don't do this. I love you. I'm begging you." She attempted to stand and approach me, but I held up a hand to stop her. Love, I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. You don't get to use that word. Love died the moment you decided to spread your legs for someone else. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Her sobbing broke into coughing hiccups. I was stupid. I was selfish. It didn't mean anything, I swear. It was never about not loving you. She reached out as if hoping I'd take her hand. I did not. You threw away our life for nothing then? Even more pathetic, I retorted, eyes cold. Look around, Hannah. Look at the people you've hurt. Was it worth it? All the sneaking, the lies? She slowly turned her head, seeing her mother's devastated expression, her friends' cold stares. She had been emphatically cast out by the very inner circle she cherished. Grace stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. I can't be here right now, she said, voice quivering with anger. She gave me an apologetic look. I'm so sorry, James. I had no idea. I nodded stiffly. Nicole helped Margaret to her feet, the older woman still weeping softly. It was clear the gathering was effectively over, and that it had served its purpose in exposing Hannah and shaming her before them. Hannah clutched at her mother as she moved to leave. Mom, please, don't leave. I need you. Margaret pulled away, standing as straight as her trembling form allowed. I need some time, Hannah, she said quietly, pain evident in each syllable. I can't look at you right now. With that, and a sorrowful glance in my direction, her mother walked toward the door with Nicole supporting her. Nicole paused by Hannah's crumpled form on the floor. Get some help, Hannah, she said, not unkindly but firmly. I never thought you of all people would do something like this. Then she left as well, closing the door behind her and leaving my wife and me alone in heavy silence. Hannah remained on her knees, shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. The divorce papers lay scattered around her where she'd pawed at them uselessly. The images of her infidelity still glowed on the television behind us, casting a harsh light over the scene. I felt strangely calm. The adrenaline of revelation was ebbing, replaced by a numbness. The deed was done. This was the climax I had craved, and it had landed with full force. I had expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Perhaps a part of me did, but another part felt hollow, exhausted. Hannah crawled a few paces toward me, stopping at my feet. She dared not touch me after my earlier rebuke. Instead, she looked up, mascara running, her once beautiful face a wreck of anguish. Please, James, I know I don't deserve it, but if there's even a shred of forgiveness in you, please. She could barely get the words out between sobs. I love you. I'm begging you for mercy. We can get counseling. I'll do anything, anything. I gazed down at her, and for the first time that night I felt a tear of my own gather in my eye. I blinked it away. Mercy, I repeated, voice soft with an edge of incredulity. After what you've done? She lowered her head, pressing her forehead to the floor at my feet in a gesture of complete supplication. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, she kept repeating, her words muffled against the carpet. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying the turmoil inside me. When I opened them, I knew there would be no softening. Get up, I said quietly. Hannah looked up, confused, then slowly pushed herself to her feet. She swayed, drained and unsteady. I stepped back, putting a deliberate distance between us. You will sign those papers, I said, voice firm. Maybe not tonight because clearly you're in no state, but soon. Don't test me on that. She pressed her shaking hands to her mouth, tears still flowing. James, please don't do this. We can work through. No, I interjected, with an authority that made her flinch. We can't. You destroyed this, Hannah. You destroyed us. And now you have to live with that. Her face crumpled, and a wail of despair escaped her. She reached for me impulsively, perhaps unable to accept my coldness. I sidestepped her grasp. No, I said again firmly. It's over. The finality in my tone seemed to break something in her. She stared at me, realization dawning that I truly meant every word. A low moan escaped her lips and she staggered back, collapsing onto the couch behind her. But what have I done? She whispered, covering her face. I let the silence hang for a beat. The strong part of me, the part that had guided this night, was satisfied. The evidence of her affair was seared into the minds of those she loved. Her pleas were falling on deaf ears. Consequences at long last were raining down. Without another word, I walked over to the laptop and closed the slideshow, turning off the TV. The living room plunged into relative darkness, illuminated only by a single dim lamp. Hannah looked up, disoriented as the incriminating images vanished, replaced by blank screen and shadows. I'll be staying elsewhere tonight," I said flatly, breaking the quiet. I couldn't stand to remain under the same roof, not after everything. My own composure was hanging by a thread, and I refused to let her see me falter. She started to cry again, a soft, desolate sound. "Please don't leave me alone," she sobbed. I ignored the comment, moving to grab a small overnight bag I had pre-packed and stashed by the hallway. As I headed toward their door, Hannah erupted in fresh desperation, scrambling off the couch to follow me. "James, James, wait!" I paused at the threshold and turned to face her one last time. "Do not call me," I said, voice low and devoid of sympathy. "Except to discuss signing those documents or necessary logistics. I mean it, Hannah." She stopped in her tracks a few feet away, hugging herself. In the dim light, she looked broken, hollow. "I'm so sorry," she whispered once more, but it was little more than a breath. I held her gaze, my own eyes stinging with restrained tears I would not let fall until I was away from here. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I replied, each word measured and firm. Then I turned the knob and walked out, closing the door behind me on her shattered cries. As I stepped into the cool night air, I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The door muffled the sound of Hannah's sobbing, and with each step I took toward my car, the weight on my chest lightened just a fraction. It was done. The awful truth was out, and she had faced the consequences I'd so carefully prepared for her. The night sky above was indifferent and silent as I stood for a moment by my car, steadying myself. My hands were trembling slightly now that the adrenaline had begun to ebb. I sucked in a lungful of fresh air and let it out slowly, watching it mist faintly in the glow of the street lamp. Inside the apartment, I knew my wife, or rather the woman who used to be my wife, was left to confront the wreckage of her choices. She was alone with her guilt and ruin, as she deserved to be. I climbed into my car and shut the door, enclosing myself in silence. Before I started the engine, I allowed myself a moment to feel the raw emotion of what had just transpired. My vision blurred as tears finally quietly spilled down my cheeks. They were tears of heartbreak, of betrayal, but also of release. I had done what I set out to do. The truth was no longer my burden alone. I wiped my face with a hard swipe of my hand and drew a shuddering breath. There was more yet to come. A divorce, the untangling of our lives, and the matter of Mark, her lover, who would soon learn what it meant to cross me. But for now, at this pivotal moment, I felt a grim sense of closure settling in. With that feeling came a cold, clear resolve. This chapter was closing in the most public, painful way, and I, at the helm, had remained cold and unyielding, just as I promised myself I would. I turned the key in the ignition. As the engine hummed to life, I cast one last look at the apartment window. The living room where not long ago the facade of our happy marriage had been irrevocably shattered. Hannah's silhouette was visible through the sheer curtain, slumped and alone, a portrait of misery. A part of me wanted to feel triumph at that sight. And perhaps I did to an extent. But overriding that was a profound sadness. Despite everything, it was a tragic end to what had once been a beautiful story for us. I set my jaw and looked away, pulling the car out onto the road. My hands had gone steady again on the wheel. There was no turning back now, and I didn't want to. It was time to move forward into whatever came next, leaving Hannah to face the fallout of her actions. My plan for revenge had unfolded in full tonight, and it had been brutal, yes, but also justified. The night swallowed my car as I drove off, the image of her tearful face gradually receding from my mind. There were still more steps to take to ensure that both she and her lover fully answered for their betrayal, and I intended to see it through, every cold and calculated step of the way. Part V. Consequences. In the aftermath of that night, a strange calm settled over me, the kind of quiet that follows a devastating storm. I had orchestrated the destruction of my marriage in one fell swoop, and now I was left sifting through the debris and ensuring the fallout hit its intended targets. True to my word, I did not return home. I stayed in a furnished apartment downtown that I leased on a month-to-month basis, a neutral space where I could be alone with my thoughts. In those first days, I found myself replaying the confrontation over and over. The images of Hannah's tear-streaked face and her mother's devastated eyes would surface unbidden, usually accompanied by a hollow ache in my chest. Yet I felt no regret for what I'd done, only a grim affirmation that it had been necessary and just. Hannah attempted to reach out as I expected she would. The morning after the reveal, I woke to a deluge of texts and voicemails from her number. Some were incoherent apologies, others were desperate pleas for another chance, promises to make amends. I deleted them without reply. She soon got the message that I would not respond. After a week, her daily messages dwindled, then ceased. I think part of her understood that the man she once knew, the forgiving, gentle husband, was gone, and in his place was someone she no longer recognized. We communicated only through lawyers after that. My attorney ensured that the divorce filing went through swiftly. Ours was a state where adultery still held weight in the legal process, and the evidence I provided, photos, receipts, even copies of text messages I'd recovered from the cloud, painted a stark picture of misconduct. The settlement talks were brief and one-sided. I had originally intended to strip her of everything financially, but in the end there was no drawn-out battle. Hannah waived any claim to alimony almost immediately, likely out of shame and a misguided attempt to show remorse. The division of assets was straightforward. I kept the house. She didn't fight me on it. In fact, she moved out within a week of our confrontation, relocating to a small apartment across town. Perhaps the memories in our home were too haunted for her to endure, or perhaps she knew she wasn't welcome there anymore. Either way, I was glad to have the space to myself. The emptiness of it was better than living a lie within those walls. Socially, the news of her infidelity spread among our circle with speed and shock. In the age of group chats and social media, secrets seldom stay contained. I hadn't posted anything publicly, but someone who was there that night likely confided in a spouse or friend, and from there the story grew legs. Soon, mutual acquaintances were aware that Hannah had betrayed me and that we were divorcing. She deactivated her social media profiles after I'm told, receiving a barrage of judgmental comments and the cold shoulder from many who used to call her a friend. I can't say I took pleasure in her social ostracization, but I didn't feel sorrow over it either. Actions have consequences. People who had once respected her now saw her as a cautionary tale. At least two of our married friends confided in me later that her downfall had been a wake-up call in their own relationships, prompting frank conversations about trust and loyalty. In that sense, her exposure served as a broader lesson, albeit a cruel one. Her mother, Margaret, remained in contact with me. A week after the night, as I grimly refer to it, Margaret called to check on me. She apologized profusely for her daughter's behavior, sounding more like she was speaking about a wayward teenager than a grown woman. I assured her that none of it was her fault. In truth, I felt awful for Margaret. She had been so proud of our marriage, of the life her daughter and I were building. Now she was left grappling with disappointment and embarrassment. From what little I gathered, Hannah's relationship with her mother became strained to the breaking point. Margaret told me during one call, voice heavy with sorrow, that she couldn't bring herself to speak to Hannah beyond the occasional brief check-in. "I just don't know what to say to her," she admitted. "She's not the daughter I thought I raised." I suspect that in time they will reconcile. A mother's love often endures beyond reason, but it will never quite be the same. Hannah didn't just break my trust, she shattered her mother's faith in her too. And what of Mark, the other architect of this mess? I made sure he didn't escape unscathed either. In the week after the confrontation, I took a calculated step to ensure he faced consequences on multiple fronts. First, I anonymously mailed a succinct package to the HR department of Hannah and Mark's company. Inside, I included a polite cover letter alerting them to a possible violation of company policy. Specifically, a manager carrying on an affair with a direct report, and attached a couple of the tamer photos, nothing too salacious, just the two of them holding hands entering the cabin and another of a kiss. I knew the corporate culture there frowned heavily on such relationships due to conflict of interest concerns. I didn't receive any direct reply, of course, but I know for a fact it caused a stir. How? Because a month later, Mark's name quietly disappeared from the company website and internal directory. An acquaintance of mine in their IT department confirmed his employment was terminated. Hannah, who had been on administrative leave during the HR investigation, resigned before they could decide on any punishment for her. In a single stroke, their workplace romance cost both of them their jobs. Professionally, they were now radioactive, at least in their industry in our city. Word gets around in tight-knit professional circles. No reputable firm was likely to hire either of them with that scandal attached. I didn't stop there. Through a mutual friend, I learned that Mark was in fact engaged to be married. His fiancée, a schoolteacher named Emily, had been eagerly planning their wedding for later in the year. The thought made my blood boil that he not only destroyed my marriage but was prepared to bring another woman into a sham marriage of his own. I struggled with the morality of involving someone innocent, but ultimately, I knew that she deserved to know what kind of man she was about to marry. I arranged an anonymous email to Emily, providing just enough detail, a couple of the photos, with myself cropped out to keep the focus on Mark and Hannah, and a brief explanation that her fiancé had been sleeping with a married colleague, my soon-to-be ex-wife, for nearly a year. I didn't sign it, nor did I need to. The evidence spoke loudly enough. I heard through the grapevine that Emily called off the engagement immediately. There was apparently a loud public confrontation between her and Mark outside their apartment, one that ended with her throwing the engagement ring at his feet for all the neighbors to see. A dramatic touch to be sure, but one that I admit brought a grim smile to my face when I heard it. Mark's personal life was in tatters, right alongside Hannah's. Socially, Mark also faced his share of backlash. Mutual friends, many of whom knew he was engaged, cut him off swiftly. A couple of his old college buddies, whom I happen to know, told me they read him the riot act for his behavior. He went from being a rising star in his field and a man soon to be married to an unemployed pariah nearly overnight. I did encounter him once by chance, a few weeks after everything came to light. I was walking into a downtown cafe and he was stepping out. For a split second, we locked eyes. He looked haggard, a shadow of the confident man I'd spied at the cabin. There was fear and shame in his face when he recognized me. He opened his mouth as if to speak, perhaps to attempt an apology or more likely to spew some bitter blame, but I didn't give him the chance. I fixed him with a stare so cold it could have frozen the blood in his veins. "Don't," was all I said, my voice low and laced with warning. The intensity of my gaze made him recoil. Whatever bravado or anger he might have felt, he swallowed it. Without another word, Mark ducked his head and hurried past me out onto the street, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there a moment, heart pounding with adrenaline. In that silent exchange, I saw a man truly afraid of the consequences of his own actions. He had lost nearly as much as I had because of this affair, and unlike me, he had no sympathetic allies, no one left in his corner. In that moment, I felt satisfied. He wasn't worth throwing a punch over. His own ruined life was punishment enough. As for Hannah and me, our divorce was finalized in what felt like record time, just 4 months after that fateful night. We signed the papers in a brief, perfunctory meeting at my attorney's office. It was the first time I'd been in a room alone with her since leaving home. She looked pale and thin, as if she hadn't been eating or sleeping well. I maintained a business-like demeanor, addressing her only to confirm she understood certain settlement points. She nodded mutely, voice barely above a whisper when she said, "Yes." At the end, as the notary stamped the documents, she finally spoke a full sentence to me. "I know you'll never forgive me," she said, her tone flat, resigned. "But I want you to know I'm working on being a better person. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did." I met her gaze for the briefest moment. I could see the depth of her remorse, the genuine sorrow. The old me might have softened at that, offered some comfort or at least acknowledgement. The man I was now only gave a slight nod. "I hope it helps you," I said quietly, and nothing more. As she left the office, she paused in the doorway, as if weighing whether to say something else. In the end, she simply whispered, "You deserve so much better," before walking away for good. Those words hung in the air after she left. "You deserve so much better." A bitter smile touched my lips. She was right. I did deserve better than the deceit and humiliation she had dealt me. In truth, I wasn't sure what I deserved anymore in terms of happiness or love, but I knew it was not the life I'd been living with her in those final months of our marriage. I won't pretend that I emerged from this saga without scars of my own. I began seeing a therapist colleague, on the sly, as I didn't want it widely known, to help process the trauma. As a psychologist, I understood the importance of confronting my own pain, not just burying it beneath revenge. In our sessions, I unpacked the anger, the betrayal, and yes, the lingering grief. Because despite everything, I had loved Hannah deeply, and the loss of that love, or rather, the shattering of the illusion of it, hurt profoundly. Healing is not a linear process. Some days I woke up feeling almost normal, focused on work and looking ahead to the future. Other days, I was hit by waves of sadness or rage at unexpected times, seeing a couple holding hands on the street or coming across an old photo of us while cleaning out the house. But each time, I found strength in reminding myself that I had stood up for my dignity. I hadn't let her betrayal break me. Instead, I had transformed my pain into a form of justice. Professionally, I poured myself into my practice with renewed intensity. In a dark irony, my experience gave me a deeper well of empathy and credibility when treating patients dealing with marital issues and infidelity. I never divulged my personal story, of course, but when I advised someone on setting boundaries or recognizing their self-worth after a partner's betrayal, the passion behind my words was real. I think, in a way, helping others navigate their heartbreak helped me mend my own. Socially, I made some new friends and drew closer to old ones who had stood by me. I found solace in simple things again, weekend fishing trips with my brother, who came to town often once he heard about the divorce, volunteering for a mental health awareness group, channeling my energy into something constructive. Each positive action was a small step away from the darkness of revenge and anger. As for Hannah, I learned through her mother that she continued therapy and even joined a support group for people who had made mistakes that cost them everything, which sounded apt. I know she struggled with depression after the divorce, an expected consequence of the guilt and the loss she brought on herself. There were even moments, usually in the dead of night when memories are hardest to escape, that I felt a twinge of pity for her. Our lives had diverged onto painful separate paths, and while I was regaining my footing, hers seemed to be an uphill climb through regret. I wouldn't wish endless misery on anyone, not even the person who hurt me most. But nor did I feel compelled to intervene or offer comfort. That was no longer my role. She had made sure of that. In the end, my revenge was complete. I had exposed the truth, upheld my dignity, and ensured that both Hannah and Mark faced consequences in every aspect of their lives. Personal, social, professional. They paid a steep price for their betrayal, as I intended. Did it bring me peace? In a sense, yes. There's a certain tranquility in knowing that justice, informal though it may be, has been served. The anger that once kept me awake at night slowly receded, no longer needed to fuel any grand act of retribution. Yet, peace is not the same as happiness. I understood that moving forward, I would need to find a way to let go of the bitterness entirely if I ever hoped to truly heal. Punishing them had been phase 1. Phase 2 was reclaiming me, the man who existed before all this, or perhaps a wiser, warier version of him. As I pen these reflections, more out of catharsis than any intention to share them, I realize that the arc of this chapter of my life has finally closed. The tension built, it crescendoed in that brutal dramatic climax, and then settled into the quiet aftermath. The climax delivered the emotional impact I sought, not only to Hannah and Mark, but to me as well. In that living room, I faced the death of a marriage and a part of myself with it. And from those ashes, I've had to rebuild. I remain cautious, perhaps more guarded with my heart than before. But I also remain principled, and I dare say stronger. There's steel in me that wasn't there in my more naive years. I know now what I'm capable of when pushed to the brink. I know the darkness I can navigate if I have to, but I also know that I prefer the light, the calm, simple contentment of an honest life. In the 2020s, our world is so interconnected that betrayals and truths often play out dramatically, almost theatrically, as mine did. I sometimes wonder if I would have done anything differently had this happened in a quieter era. With no high-tech trackers or digital cameras at my disposal, would I have had the courage to confront her so directly? I believe I would have, eventually. The tools may change, but human emotions remain the same across eras. Love, pain, vengeance, redemption. Ultimately, I've learned that revenge, while potent, is not a cure. It's a reckoning. It brings a measure of justice, yes, and perhaps a measure of satisfaction. But it doesn't erase the pain or the loss. It simply acknowledges them in a very dramatic way. The rest, the healing, the moving on, that's work one must do on their own. In the quiet moments when there's no audience, no grand reveal. I'm doing that work now, day by day. and I am optimistic that with time, I will emerge whole on the other side. The man who walked into that darkness is not the same man who walks out, and that's okay. Life is about change, even when it's forged in fire. One late evening, as I sat on the porch of my now peaceful home, I found myself recalling a quote I often tell patients. Sometimes you have to confront the darkness to see the light. I had confronted hers and mine. And now, finally, dawn didn't feel so far off. With the drama behind me and the lessons etched into my soul, I close this chapter of revenge and heartache. Whatever the future holds, I step into it wiser, stronger, and unyielding in the face of betrayal. My story is not defined by the pain that was inflicted on me, but by how I responded to it. With intensity, with intelligence, and yes, with a cold, calculated vengeance that few will forget. And now, having delivered that vengeance and set the scales right, I can finally begin to leave it all behind.